Saved one.
What's up, Notre Dame fans? Mike Singer, Tyler Horka, and Jack Soble live on the Blue Gold YouTube channel for this week's Notre Dame six-pack show. Yes, we are on a Tuesday. I hate changing times and schedules and whatnot, but moving forward, six-pack show, Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. The show with Tim Hyde and myself, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Tim had to switch things around, and we go by Tim's schedule. Just teasing you, Tim. Yeah, so that's the schedule moving forward. Of course, Friday, 1 p.m. recruiting show. Lots to discuss today. We're kind of in the dog days of May when it comes to covering the actual football team. Recruiting, tons happening, of course, but it's kind of a slow period. But Notre Dame always gives us some things to talk about, so we'll just go ahead and dive into it. Joel Klatt, guys, put out his post-spring top 25. I'm not able to put it on the screen, but Penn State 1, Texas 2, Ohio State 3, Oregon 4, Clemson 5, Notre Dame's in 6, LSU 7, Georgia 8, Bama 9, Illinois at 10. Jack, what do you like, not like about that list? And there's been several top 25 lists, but let's just talk about Klatt specifically.
Yeah, I think like the top 6, you can arrange them in pretty much any order. I don't know if I'd be too comfortable with putting Notre Dame at number 1 just because of the inexperience they have at quarterback. It's just tough to justify that in my opinion. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, he has Texas at number 2. There's a difference between an Arch Manning who has 90 career pass attempts, including a few rushing attempts, and he's also got a few rushing attempts at the highest stage, against in a week 14 game against Texas A&M and in the college football playoffs. So I think that's a difference between like what some have and what Notre Dame has. But you look at the top 10, I think 5 of them, I forget exactly what Klatt's list is, but it's Notre Dame, Ohio State, Alabama, and a couple other Georgia, and one other that's in the top 10 on a lot of these polls that have a first time starting quarterback. So those are my couple of thoughts. Like, I don't know if you can put Notre Dame at number 1 because of the quarterbacking experience, but it is the age of the elite program starting a new quarterback this year, it seems.
Yeah, I'm not at all deterred by a first-year quarterback, especially in Notre Dame's case where you could be starting a junior if it's Kenny Minchey. You could be starting a sophomore, obviously, if it's CJ Carr, redshirt freshman by classification. But if you're an elite program, I think you should be able to start first-year players, second-year players, first-time starters in this case, whoever it is for Notre Dame. So I'm not deterred by that. And like you said, Jack, there's multiple programs on these lists that are doing just that, starting a first-time starter. I will say Penn State keeps showing up in the top 5 of these, and I know we have differing opinions on that, Jack, but like if there is a tiebreaker, maybe it is quarterback experience because Drew Aller has plenty of that for Penn State, and then they've got a lot of experience at a lot of other positions. So when you're looking at Penn State showing up in Joel Klatt's as the number 1 team in the country, that is sort of a tiebreaker because I look at Notre Dame and Penn State as both losing a lot, but also returning enough coaches and whatnot to where these two teams just played each other in the Orange Bowl. So, recency bias says Notre Dame, the team that went on to the national championship game and ended up playing Ohio State pretty close, pretty competitive, especially in that second half, gets the tiebreaker. But Jack, I think like an experienced quarterback, as much as I don't think it should be the end-all be-all for how you rank a team in early May, it can be a bit of a difference maker and a tiebreaker.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Penn State thing really boils down to they lost their 2 best players in Abdul Carter and Tyler Warren, but really nothing else, and they have a ton of NFL-level talent, including 2 running backs who stayed for their 4th year despite clearly being NFL-level players, which almost never happens. But no, I see the top 6 for Klatt. It's Penn State, Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, Clemson, Notre Dame. I think you can put those in any order and it wouldn't be wrong at this point in the cycle. And then after that, you have any number of talented but flawed SEC teams, like the Georgias and LSU's and Alabamas and South Carolinas and Floridas of the world. Michigan, I think, is a little too high in Clats, but that's okay. I'm higher on Michigan than most Notre Dame fans, which that's to be expected. But I think Clat has them at number 12. That's a little bit too high. Illinois is interesting. You have the returning production there as well. I was watching JD Piquel's show earlier today. I think Illinois is maybe number 2 in returning production behind only Clemson. And obviously that's why Clemson's up there. Clemson's got the quarterback in Cade Klubnik, who quietly had a really good year last year, and what should be the best defensive line in football. They are stacked up front. And when you have those two things, you can go a long way.
Yeah, I'm looking at JD Piquel's now that you mention him, and we're talking about him in this segment as well. Texas number 1. Like, look at the top, the top 7 teams were all in last year's 12-team college football playoff. So I think that's pretty telling. Like, you make it one year, you're probably going to return enough, even in Texas's case, where they just have 12 guys go in the NFL draft, the most ever in program history. These are the type of programs, Jack, that are returning enough. And I think Notre Dame is in that class now where, it's been over a decade of the college football playoff era now. It started with 4 teams in the 2014 season. Notre Dame's done it 3 times in that span, but now I think Notre Dame has turned a corner in the Marcus Freeman era where it's returning enough guys. Like, it's in that space of Ohio State and Oregon and Georgia, where I look at them the same way. Like, a Notre Dame team that almost won the national championship last year, you lose a few NFL draft picks, you lose your starting quarterback, this, that, and the other. I think you could still kind of run it back with this year's Notre Dame team and still be in that class of teams that's like, okay, yeah, these are the ones that are probably going to make the CFP. I think Notre Dame has entered that space.
Sorry, I'm coming. All right, Singer struggling today. Minus 10 points for Singer. Notre Dame, Clemson announcing home and homes for, 12 seasons, 2027 to 2038. I think this is absolutely fantastic, Jack. What do you think?
Yeah, this is clearly great for the Notre Dame football program. I think as super conferences really start to take hold, and more of them are playing 9-game conference schedules. The Big Ten already does. The SEC probably will in the next couple of years. You're going to start to see more and more teams say, you know what, we probably don't need to schedule Notre Dame because we're playing 5 top 15 teams in the SEC or 3 top 5 teams in the Big Ten. And if you're USC, which they're already very much considering, they've said on the record that, they love the USC series, but they're going to do what's best for USC. So that one might not be around for much longer. So if you're Notre Dame, you badly need to play a team like Clemson every year. And I think recent events, both by chance, in the college football playoff and the ACC championship, the one year Notre Dame was there, and by schedule, a real death knell on Notre Dame's 2023 season. And the first, when I joined the beat, this was the win of the Marcus Freeman era. Obviously, a lot has passed it this year, but the first huge win of the Marcus Freeman era was against Clemson. This is very much kind of a rivalry developing in the 2020s, I think, and solidifying, playing every year. It's really good for Notre Dame on multiple levels.
Yeah, I like the multiple levels comment because not all of those are good. I don't think. Like, I saw a comment here in the live chat. How long is Dabo Sweeney going to be there? I think that's a factor in this because what Clemson football was before he was there is not what it is now. Obviously, it was not winning national championships, going to national championship games, and they've even fallen away from that a little bit with Dabo being there. But like we just talked about in all these post-spring rankings, they look like they're going to be back to what they were being. So playing this version of Clemson, absolutely you want to do that if you're Notre Dame, because talk about these levels to this, Jack. The other levels are you going to play USC every single year? Maybe not. There's a little bit of an unknown there. The Stanford thing, there's another one of your annual rivals. They're in the same situation there where they're in the ACC. Is it going to be one of Notre Dame's all-time ACC games or whatever. You don't really know. And do you want Stanford, who literally just fired their head coach, to be your annual rival as well? And then obviously Navy being the other one that's going to be there all the time, but for different reasons. I like adding Clemson because while Sweeney is there, you have a big time game. Like you said, Jack, in 2022, Clemson eventually goes 10-3 that year, but that was Clemson's first loss of the year. It's a top 5 team. Marcus Freeman needed that game to sort of say, hey, we're going to have great things in my tenure here. Like, this is going to be an example, a little bit of a foreshadowing of that. And I think that's what it served to be. With you look at what Notre Dame just did this past season. But then I look at the rivalry as a whole, ever since they started playing somewhat consistently in 2015. That game was a blowout, but then it came down to the wire. You've had a couple different blowouts, but you've had them in big stages. Like the Cotton Bowl was a big stage. The ACC Championship was a big stage. And then you've had your close games where Notre Dame knocks off number 1 Clemson in that COVID year and eventually, like I said, played them in the ACC title game. So what I actually just wrote when I got to thinking about this at blueandgold.com, you could check out that article. It's like, I'm a big hockey guy. I think everyone watching that, most people know that. I'm all in on these Stanley Cup playoffs right now. I think what you have with Notre Dame and Clemson is like potential for a playoff type series feel to it. And I know you only get to play them once a year, but you have in Clemson and Notre Dame, you haven't had a back-to-back winner in this series for 5 games in a row now. And yeah, you're going to get some of those blowouts that I mentioned, but you're also going to get the bangers that I mentioned as well, like that the double overtime, number 1 versus, Notre Dame was undefeated at the time too, I believe. Like that was a big time game. So you're going to get some blowouts, you're going to get some big time games, and you're going to get what feels like a playoff series. And what is that? It's every time a game ends in the playoffs and every time a game ends against your bitter rival in college football. In the playoffs, it's okay, I can't wait to see these guys in 48 hours. In college football, it's like, get me through these next 365 days because I want to play against these guys again and I want to beat them. If I just lost to them, I want to beat them next time. If I just beat them, I want to beat them again. I think you have that opportunity with Clemson and Notre Dame.
Yeah, I would like to see this game as a late season game because I think Notre Dame very much needs more of the late season big games and fewer of the early season big games because I think that can affect what you do with your roster. Like I think Notre Dame would feel a lot better about starting its inexperienced quarterback if Miami was week 10 and not week 1. You mentioned Dabo maybe not being there forever. I would think that he's elevated the program to the point where one would think whoever comes after him is inheriting a good situation. Number 2, I mean, say what you will about Dabo, Clemson's long-term outlook looks a lot better than it did 2 years ago. The way they've recruited, the way they've developed Cade Klubnik, I think a lot of the criticism for Dabo, he's even using the transfer portal a little bit. Obviously not as much as most schools, but he filled a hole with the Purdue edge rusher. His name's going to escape me, but I see Clemson as a program that's back on the up. I think what they're doing can be sustained, and I think this is a great thing for Notre Dame.
Please have them on the college campuses. I don't want to see Charlotte and Chicago. Like, come on. In South Bend and Clemson. Tyler, what would you say is a good year for Chris Ash? Like, what should the expectations be for the first year Notre Dame defense coordinator?
Yeah, I got this question in Hey Horka thread a couple weeks ago. Obviously, put it in the article at blueandgold.com. And I think Jack was looking at that thread and he kind of agreed with me. And it's that in the key areas, the key metrics, you just don't want to see a falling off of any sort from what Al Golden was doing with this Notre Dame defense, because in those key and critical areas, which he came out and told us in the media all the time, that's what he's focusing on. He's not focusing on really, I know points are the end all be all. It's the name of the game here. You have more points than the other team, you win. But there's so much that goes into that for a defense and a defensive coordinator that's what they have to look at. And that's what they have to harp in on. Otherwise, you're not going to win these games. So it's third down defense. It's red zone defense. It's getting off the field via turnovers, which Notre Dame was tremendous at last year. And these are things that Al Golden got better at every single season that he was at Notre Dame for 3 years, to a point where last year was like the crescendo, right? Like it all came together and Notre Dame got all the way to the national championship because of that. Let's all agree that Notre Dame's best side of the ball last year was the defensive side of the ball. So for Chris Ash, it's it's not falling off in those key areas. Like, you don't want to see a defense that struggles to get off the field on third down, or when a team gets into the red zone is scoring at will. I think Notre Dame, while it gave up a lot of touchdowns in the red zone, it overall it didn't give up. When you look at the percentage of drives in the red zone that actually resulted in points of any kind, Notre Dame was way up there on the charts. And that's all about getting off the field. I guarantee you the turnovers are a big part of that. Fourth down defense is a big part of that. So for Chris Ash, key in on those key areas. You have the personnel to run it back, if you will. And really, this should not look a whole lot different from Al Golden's defense. If it does, that's a bad year for Chris Ash. If it looks a lot the same, it's a pretty good year for Chris Ash, and I think there's potential for that.
I do want to adjust expectations a little bit because obviously this is Notre Dame. The program is in a good spot. The defense, Al Golden, obviously left in a good spot. It is really, really hard not to take even a slight step back in the first year of a new coordinator when you take over a successful defense. There's the terminology changes. Obviously Chris Ash has said all the right things about this. He said he's only there to enhance. He's not there to reinvent the wheel. But it is inevitable to take at least a bit of a step back, I think, with a new coordinator taking over a successful defense. Al Golden talked so much in spring practice last year about how this was level 300 of his defense, or level 500 or whatever, and how much he could put in because the guys had played in the same system 3 years in a row. Chris Ash isn't remodeling the system, but he's going to come in and put his stamp on it. It's also, by the way, not realistic to ask a new coordinator to come in and just run someone else's defense. There's plenty of precedent for that ending in disaster too. So I think Notre Dame's taking the right approach. I think they're saying all the right things. I think like you said, Tyler, the key point should be third down, red zone, turnovers, like the things that really impact winning. But it's hard for me to see the defense being exactly as good. I think not having a steep drop off is obviously a fair and realistic expectation. But to not take at least a tiny step back, I feel like is hard to do with a new coordinator.
So I guess I'll just pose this question to you, make this more of a discussion topic as much as it is a debate. What would be a good year for him then? Like, do similar things, but maybe not as well, or maybe they're better at some of the things that they weren't as good at last year. Like making it his own, maybe is that what would make it a good year for him?
I don't know. It's hard to set a baseline expectation given how much goes into this. And I agree with you that just like setting a total yards baseline or a points baseline is obviously unfair because there's a lot there's just so much that goes into that. And like total yards really don't matter anymore. This is the 21st century. But I don't know exactly what to say as an answer. It's just so early. And I feel like we know this when we see it. Like at the end of the season, we'll be able to say this was a successful year for Chris Ash. But it's so hard to maintain the same level of excellence that Notre Dame got to with a new coordinator. Notre Dame has done things under Marcus Freeman in the last season that I thought they were not capable of given the circumstances, but it is really hard to sustain that success with a new coordinator just because of how much has to change, how much like it or not, you have to reset.
And I just continuing this conversation, it's going to be pretty unfair when Notre Dame doesn't have maybe as good of a defense as it had last year with, what I thought was probably a first round talent in Benjamin Morrison. Xavier Watts should have been like a second round talent. All these guys, and people are going to be saying, what the heck, Chris Ash, why isn't this as good?
Exactly.
That's going to be tough. So I agree with you on that. But I also do think, like I said earlier, there is enough personnel coming back. Like the foundation is set. He doesn't have to – he's going to change some things because he's been around the game long enough and he knows his own things that he can. But you could still leave a lot of the same principles the same as well. The marrying of that, the blend is what can make it really good.
From Elko to Lee to Freeman to Golden to Ash, I think we're just going to see more of the same. That's my humble opinion. I think expectations should be you're Al Golden 2.0. That's just me. Okay, so Jack really insisted that we talk about this one. Obviously, we know that Notre Dame needs more star power at the wide receiver position, but Jack, where else does Notre Dame really need to kind of like up its game? This is another question that we got from a from a Blue and Gold subscriber to Tyler. I believe it was an article for Tyler recently.
Yes, this was another Hey Horka question, and I agree with Horka's answer that the obvious answer is defensive tackle, at least on the current team. We've talked about this plenty on this show. I like the defensive tackles in the room. I think they have a solid floor and they're good. There's good depth, but that's a position where to be successful in December, you kind of need star power at that spot, and that remains a bit of a question mark with this team.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it right now, and again, Ohio State, only one team wins the national championship every year, right? And it was Ohio State last year. Ohio State had a defensive tackle taken in the first round of the NFL draft. That was Tyleik Williams. Notre Dame, for as good as the defensive line was last year, I think it played, at full health was really good. Unfortunately, you didn't get to see full health because Riley Mills was injured for almost all of that playoff run. But even when Riley Mills is healthy, and Howard Cross is the other guy that he's playing with there. Howard Cross goes undrafted. Riley Mills goes in the 5th round. Tyleik Williams is a first-round talent. I think you saw that in that game where you're like, okay, and just really the whole season, you're just like, yeah, Notre Dame's defensive line is maybe playing more than the sum of its parts right now. But if you just had, like I said, I'm looking at the list right now, one of these guys that gets drafted in the first round, I think you're really the perception of your defense changes immensely. Like when you have the guys that Georgia puts out there all the time. I believe Michigan had 2 of them, and right, Michigan is only a couple years away from years removed from winning the national title. Yeah, you have Mason Graham go number 5 overall. You had Kenneth Grant go number 13 overall. When Notre Dame starts getting these guys that go in the first round of the NFL draft from the defensive line, I think you're talking about a team that really gets over the top and gets over the hump because, yeah, we're talking about the wide receiver position. That, unless you're like one of these wide receiver factories, I don't think it's going to be as feasible for you to like pump those guys into the NFL the way Ohio State does or whoever. But like Notre Dame could be putting defensive tackles into the NFL draft at the rate of like Michigan, right? Like they should turn that around. And I know Mike's coming on here because the recruiting on that front has changed quite considerably in the last few months, has it not?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, especially at the end spot. But I just want to throw out there, do you remember that time you went and saw Drake Bowen when he was a recruit?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He played against Kenneth Grant that day.
I remember
that?
Yeah.
Big dude. Yeah, and I'm a Dolphins fan. Of course, the Dolphins drafting a Michigan guy. You know how that makes me feel. I want to throw one spot out there that I feel like maybe you guys will have a take on. What about tight end? We haven't had a lot of star power. Like Mitchell Evans was good this year. I think we expected a big jump from 23 to 24. Obviously, the injury and Denbrock not using the tight ends as much. But would you like to see Notre Dame have another like first, second round pick? Like there was a trend of Komets and Tremble and Mayer in recent history, and it's like we haven't had that as much. Just throwing out a thought, Jack. What do you think?
Sure, and I think Evans was like coming into the season, like people thought Evans was a top 2 tight end in college football. Like the injury obviously hurt him, and I think he was that guy towards the end of the season. He's just not as good of a mover as you'd want in a first round pick. I will, going back to the defensive tackles, I would caution you and everyone with using draft status as an evaluator of college success. I think healthy Cross and Mills at their peak were perfectly capable of being national championship defensive tackles, given the roster around them. Obviously, Mills was out. Cross was a shell of himself with that ankle. But then you go to the current team, and it's obvious that Notre Dame needs to do a better job at stacking defensive tackle talent. Is the point there, because you obviously don't have the obvious replacements, or certainly not long-term replacements. I think Notre Dame did perfectly well, about as well as you could expect, putting together a DT room kind of on the fly this offseason. Getting Anye back obviously helped with that, but they don't have the obvious future stars at defensive tackle in the pipeline that you have at other positions.
I think a really good comparison for that, Jack, is like Howard Cross and Riley Mills being perfectly acceptable to win a national title at Notre Dame, which I agree with. Like, you don't need a Mason Graham or a Kenneth Grant. You can win with those guys. Just as Notre Dame doesn't need a Cam Ward, the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft, to win the national championship. You dang near won it with Riley Leonard, who's a 6th round NFL draft pick, right? Like he was also acceptable and did what he had to do. However, if you do have guys like that, I do think it's like you kind of open up a little bit more potential. And I'm not saying Cam Ward, like you go hindsight's 2020, you go back and maybe he would have been better at Notre Dame. I don't know. I think Mike Dunbrock did phenomenal with Riley Leonard, and that was probably a really good take. But if Notre Dame magically did have a number 1 overall talent at the quarterback position, I'll just end this conversation with that. QB could be the answer to this question, because if you have star power of like a national championship QB like all these other schools have had, then you're probably going to win the national championship. That's how it works.
Honestly, I kind of thought quarterback was just a given. That's why I kind of skipped it.
Yeah. And receiver. Yeah. Tyler, you did an article the other day. This was the headline, what quiet spring transfer portal window says about a lot of potential, quote, for Notre Dame football in 2025. What do you mean by that, Ty?
Yeah, and I know Jack agrees with this wholly as well, because it's really the only rational take you can take from what happened with Notre Dame in the transfer portal, or what didn't happen with Notre Dame in the transfer portal. I just use the running back room as sort of the baseline and the lead in, and the most glaring example for what happened with Notre Dame here is that you have 6 guys in the Notre Dame running back room who could all be, I mean, there's a couple of them that would definitely be running back ones elsewhere. Jeremiah Love included. Like, heck, if he wanted to go get a bag or something, he could have left and said, you know what, I'm going to finish my career somewhere else. Like, that's just the way college football is now. He stayed all the way down to your true freshman and Nolan James Jr. He didn't have a cold feet moment and be like, you know what, maybe I'm getting into something that I don't need to be a part of here with Notre Dame with all these guys ahead of me on the depth chart. And then you look right in the middle of it, like Keidron Young and Jabron Payne and Neas Williams. Those are guys that fit into that category that I mentioned of leave, and you're definitely going to get carries somewhere else. Maybe you get more money somewhere else, and maybe that helps your draft status somewhere else. But they're all here, and you see that at different position groups too. The offensive line was really the only one that got ravaged, and that happened in the winter portal. So most of your defensive backs are here, sans Kennedy Urlacher. You only lost 1 quarterback, and you thought that was going to happen. So what it says about the potential and the future for this Notre Dame program is that guys are bought in. They like being in South Bend. They like being coached by Marcus Freeman, and they like being a part of something that's really special, because I don't think it should be lost that you go back 4 months ago and me and Jack were covering one of the most special seasons that Notre Dame has had in the last 3 or 4 decades. Like, that's what it was. And that's what these guys obviously think it can be moving forward. And I think that's pretty cool that pretty much none of them left. They all want to be a part of this, and they're going to run it back at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I completely agree with all that. I think it's a factor that we should note here is again, the value of the degree here. I think you really see that with like the rising juniors and rising seniors who can't graduate in 3 or 3.5 years, where it's like, yeah, you'll probably leave eventually, but if you've been here for this long, and obviously Notre Dame actually makes you go to class, if you've been here for this long, you've gone through difficult classes, it would kind of be selling yourself short to leave without a degree for the promise of playing a little more, getting a little cash at a different school. It's just not worth it. And that I think is a big reason Notre Dame's special teams are consistently excellent. It's a big reason Notre Dame can keep its depth. Like guys like Junior Tui Halamaka last year, who was a 3rd stringer, didn't leave, stayed again this year, even though he's probably projected to be a 3rd stringer again, even though he really helped them win college playoff games, particularly in that Sugar Bowl. I do think it says like the guys believe in this team. If you were leaving, you probably had a really good reason. I know the only one that you look at and you're like, oh man, that he was someone that Notre Dame would like to keep was Kennedy Urlacher. Even then, he was probably your number 5 safety this year. So it's a development that I don't think any of us saw coming, and it says really good things about the future of the program.
Yeah, now like spinning it forward, I really want this house settlement to come out, because I want to know like what the roster looks like. And then we might have even said this last week on this very show. I know we've talked about it on blueandgold.com message board. It's like this has to be a little bit of a preparation for the 105 number, right? Because like I just don't know what Notre Dame would do if they had to trim down to 85 right now, because you got And Marcus Freeman said it in his press conference a couple weeks ago. He was like, yeah, like we're in the mid 90s. We know that. And even if the number is 105, we're going to stay in the mid 90s. That's pretty cool for some walk-ons that obviously get to stick around. But every program has what, Jack, like 20 walk-ons. So there's going to be some fat to be trimmed there. That stinks. But just like, I think it's pretty cool for Notre Dame to be sitting in the mid 90s right now in terms of scholarship players, and to feel pretty good about that. It's the number is going to be 105 because like you didn't have to have those tough conversations if the number was going to be 85. Like we had a list of guys. Let's not sugarcoat this, Jack, where we're fully prepping these stories and we're like, we wouldn't be surprised if this guy goes into the transfer portal or that guy. So maybe that 105 number is helping out, but I think to a larger point, it's more of the stuff that we mentioned. It's the degree, it's wanting to be a part of this, it's liking the situation in South Bend more than it is anything that's going to come down with that House versus NCAA settlement.
Well, it does seem like the walk-on cuts are going to wind up not happening because the judge in the settlement case, and again, I am the last person who can claim to be an expert on this. The judge in the settlement case said explicitly, like, she's not approving that thing unless some kind of grandfather clause is built in. So walk-ons aren't going to get cut. What I would worry in the back of my mind if I was like a back of the roster Notre Dame scholarship player a little bit is what if the settlement completely fails and, oh boy, it's 85 again and Notre Dame's at 93. Then you're going to have quite a few medical scholarship stories coming out in the near future. Obviously, the hope for everyone involved is that does not come to that.
I disagree. I'm actually the last person to speak on that because I know nothing about that stuff. I'm gonna have to wise up. All right. Let me see if I can't share the screen real quick. Let's see if I can figure this out.
Yeah, we need a visual here, don't we?
Yeah, we have to. Okay, so tweet from Tyler Horka. A few months ago, Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles were on a magazine cover together and backcourt starters for the number one team in the country. Now they're contentiously conversing as ex-Notre Dame teammates. Let's roll the video. So we'll tap up.
If only we knew what was being said here. It doesn't look like friendly banter.
No, it does not.
And Jack, actually, we talked about this over the weekend, and I've gotten more on his side where at first I was like, this is a nothing burger. You watch it a couple times and like Hannah Hidalgo don't look happy. Olivia Miles looks like she's trying to defend herself for whatever Hannah is saying. And then a policeman comes in.
Yes.
Which is never good.
I wonder if he's just like, there's cameras. We gotta, you ladies need to go
I'm
do this
sure
somewhere else.
That's part of it. Yeah, that certainly seems like, take this inside. I think he might have been trying to help him out.
Yeah, I guess we got 6 minutes to talk about this, Jack. And
all right, do 6 minutes on this, and then what else is going on in terms of hoops, or if we have 2 extra minutes, you guys can just talk about whatever's on your mind.
Cool.
Yeah, I think I kind of put my thoughts out there on it in that tweet. It's like, how the heck did this unravel so quickly? It had to have been unraveling before, and like that's sort of a testament to how good those players were. Like the team that Niele Ivey assembled, if what you guys just saw on the screen, and if you're listening back on Apple, you've probably seen it on Twitter. It's a not so friendly conversation between Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles. Those were probably happening, Jack, in, I don't know, November, December, January. When I talk about being number one on the cover and being number one in the country and being on the cover of that magazine, that was February. That was like early February. So I don't think it just boils over in the season. That was early February. The season ends in late March. Does this really boil over in 6 or 7 weeks to that point? Probably not. It was probably happening before that. And if it was, they still won 19 games in a row in spite of that. They still were the number one team in the country. They still were a national championship type of talented team. So that leads you to the other side of the other part of the conversation. It sucks that it came to what it did because, yeah, they could have won it all had things stayed the way that they were. If they were rolling like they were in January and February, they really could have won it all. They had the talent for that. Now Olivia Miles is finishing her career elsewhere. 3 of the other teammates from that team are doing the same. 3 more got drafted in the WNBA, a couple exhausted their eligibility, and you've only taken in 3 transfers to try to, put out the house fire, if you will. So, Jack, I know you cover the men, but it's impossible not to be immersed in this story, and it's pretty incredible the way things have sort of come this way.
Yeah, I mean I was in favor of talking about this because that video is national news at the moment. If you follow women's college basketball, which I know we both do, like you mentioned the 19-game winning streak. I think it's a classic example of winning covers up everything. Like you have some successful teams throughout sports history who famously hated each other. Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen despise each other right now, and until while the winning still happens, you can cover up a lot of that. You can turn the other cheek, but I think you saw some of that. Like as soon as Notre Dame stopped winning, that's when it really spiraled. And I think like the video we saw, obviously it's one exchange, but it does not look like two people who are particularly fond of each other. I also think, Mike, did you have something to say?
Yeah, where was that? What was the real quick for those ones?
That was during either during, before, or after the WNBA preseason game between the Dallas Wings and the Las Vegas Aces. Do I have that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So
Friday.
Yeah, so it was Friday.
And it was in South Bend too. That's another part of this.
Purcell Pavilion, yeah.
Olivia Miles, who's no longer a Notre Dame student. I guess she probably, is finishing her graduate work and whatnot. So it's not like she had to come back for it, but she's no longer a part of the program, and she was there. And that clearly looked like Hannah was talking to her in person for the first time in a while, right? Like, she kind of came up and said, hey, let's talk about something that we've been needing to talk about. So there's that. The other part of this, Jack, that I think we should probably spend the last 2 minutes talking about is like, and there's no way to know this. And I don't even know if Niele Ivey knows it for sure, but like, is that the rift that caused things to unfold? And can you put or do you even need a Band-Aid to like, cause I listened to Niele Ivey on Wake Up the Echoes, Notre Dame's in-house podcast. And she was on there just last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago. And she talked about a blank canvas and, like the players who she's adding, which again, she has added 3. You're bringing in a true freshman as well. And Leah Macy are really excited to be a part of this. And they want to win, and they want to wear the Notre Dame logo and the name across their chest. Is it like snapping of the fingers? And here's the thing. If the animosity is gone, that's huge. That's great. Because like you said, Jack, you can win in spite of it, but you have to have a whole lot of talent, and you lost a lot of it in Miles and the WNBA draft picks. But now the other thing is like, did you lose too much because of the rift? And the WNBA, like that is what it is. You were losing those players anyway. But did you lose Miles? Did you lose Kate Koval? Emma Risch could have played a part on this team. Like, because of this rift, did you lose too much that without it, and there's no animosity in the room anymore and whatnot? Is it over anyway? Because like you lost so much and you're building from ground zero. That's what I worry for this team.
I would like. I know we're coming up on about a year since this first happened, but I have a hard time believing that the Instagram story from Hannah Hidalgo, and like those of you in the comments who don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. This made national news. Hannah Hidalgo posting a homophobic video on her Instagram story, and I would like to hear her in-person explanation on this, because I have a hard time believing that had nothing to do with team chemistry. Like,
and she didn't do enough in that Players Tribune article to
correct
it or describe it or anything. She did not do enough.
I have 2 questions, and after this I'm done. That she did not answer in the Players Tribune article. Number 1, why did you post it? And 2, do you agree with it?
Yeah, and those are questions that her teammates probably asked her in person, and maybe some of those teammates are no longer her teammates now. Like that's speculation, but
very much speculation. We should clarify that.
It's 100% speculation, but you can read between lines. Probably like this team got dismantled one way or the other. This team was dismantled from what it was last year.
Folks, really appreciate you tuning into this week's Notre Dame Six Pack Show. If you're watching live and you're just tuning in, rewind, watch from the beginning, hit the thumbs up on this video, subscribe to the Blue and Gold YouTube channel for more content. We'll be live next Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time with myself and Tim Hyde, and then Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern time yours truly, and Kyle Kelly talking some Notre Dame recruiting. Really appreciate you all for tuning in. And as always, we will catch you next time.